Hey guys, tonight we're going to start somewhere small. Just a smile. That little tug at the corners of your mouth you did earlier today, maybe when someone passed in the hallway, or when you opened your phone and knew you had to reply even though you didn't really want to. You smiled. And the truth is, you didn't mean it. Not really. It's not even that you were trying to lie. You were just doing what you've always done, what you've seen 1,000 times before. A gesture passed down like a family heirloom, silent, habitual, and well, mostly fake. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You smile without thinking, but your face remembers more than you do. It knows how to look pleased when you're not, how to stay neutral when your chest is tightening, how to flash amusement when boredom is making your skull hum. That first smile, innocent, casual, is the beginning of a lifelong performance. Not a malicious one, not a manipulative one, just a kind of survival, a rehearsal you don't remember auditioning for. You learned it early. Babies don't fake emotions, but they learn very quickly which ones make the room safer. Cry too long, faces turn cold. Giggle once, and the world lights up like a game show prize wheel. And so you started choosing which feelings to keep and which to hide even before you knew their names. Historians still argue whether emotional expression has evolved more from cultural adaptation or biological reflex. But either way, by the time you were toddling, you already had a small emotional toolkit, smiles that calmed adults, pouty faces that earned snacks, wide eyes that bought you time. A performance. Yes, but a necessary one. And it didn't stop. School added layers. The "I'm fine" mask, the polite chuckle when someone you didn't like tried a joke, the proud shrug when you actually wanted applause. Little betrayals of the truth so tiny and practiced that you stopped noticing them. Here's a mainstream truth. Most of human social life runs on this kind of microacting. Psychologists call it display rules, the unspoken social guidelines for how emotions should be shown in public. These rules vary by culture, of course. A Japanese child may learn to suppress anger. An American one might be encouraged to express it, but only up to a point and always with a dash of charm. Either way, you end up with a borrowed performance. Emotions dressed up for other people's comfort. And here's where it gets strange, because sometimes the act outlives the actor. You smile so much at work out of courtesy, out of training, that eventually you do feel happier. This isn't just metaphorical. Studies in emotional feedback suggest that facial expression can literally change the chemicals your brain releases. You pretend to be okay and your body, poor thing, believes you. Quirky tidbit. In the 1800s, French neurologist Guillaume Duchenne experimented with electrical currents to discover the real smile, the one that lights up the eyes as well as the mouth. He zapped subjects' faces until he found what he called the smile of joy. The creepy part. Most social smiles didn't qualify. Your polite grin at the coffee shop, fake by Duchenne's standards. Your sarcastic smirk at a meeting, definitely fake. The body knows the difference even if you don't. And what about that one time you felt something real, panic or grief or joy, and someone else said, "You're being too emotional"? That moment didn't just sting, it trained you. It warned you. Be careful with truth. Don't feel too loudly. Don't risk it. You absorbed that, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You adapted. You tucked away the rawness. You learned to edit. But what if you edited too much? What if tonight, as your head sinks into your pillow, you realize that some of the emotions you reach for, the guilt, the motivation, the relief, don't quite feel like yours anymore? Not because you're broken, but because you've been rehearsing for so long that the script took over. Here's a thought that may not let go easily. The average person tells 1 to 2 lies a day. But emotions, those might be faked 20, 30, even 50 times. Smiles, laughs, nods, even little gasps. Some researchers say these performances are not lies, but tools. Social oil, emotional glue. But still, if you were to strip them all away just for a minute, what would be left? That's the quiet terror of self-awareness, realizing that much of what you think you feel is actually what you were taught to feel. And once you know that, it becomes hard to unknow. But don't worry, we're not here to scold you. You're not wrong for wearing masks. Everyone does. You're not even wrong for forgetting you had one on. That's just part of the long, complicated art of being human. You've simply reached that quiet moment in the night, the kind where finally you can look inwards without needing to act. And you start to wonder what it would be like to unlearn a smile. Or two. You don't remember the first emotion you borrowed. Maybe it was a frown someone else has worn briefly when you didn't get what you wanted, or a tiny gasp when your parent gasped, a copied fear, a mirrored joy. You didn't yet have a name for what you felt, but your body was already excellent at imitation. And imitation is how most of us learn to feel. Tonight your memory opens like an old photo album. No sound, just faces. Your mother's quick sigh when the news was bad, the way your father turned his whole head to hide tears that never quite came, the teacher who smiled when she was clearly tired. You absorbed it all not consciously, just the way a sponge absorbs water without asking whether it's clean. That's the quiet beginning of emotional inheritance. Not just what you feel, but how you feel. Tone, timing, even posture gets passed down long before you learn the vocabulary. And here's the strange part. Sometimes your body remembers these emotional blueprints more than your conscious mind ever will. Mainstream psychology calls this emotional modeling. Children don't just observe emotions. They adopt them like hand-me-down clothes. Even the fit doesn't have to be perfect, just familiar. A child raised in a home where disappointment is met with silence, not words, will often grow into an adult who feels a strange tightness when something goes wrong, but can't name why. There's no thunderclap, just a shape that settles in the chest like fog. Historians still argue whether emotional norms are biologically fixed or entirely socialized. But in medieval Europe, for example, noble children were taught from infancy not to display sorrow or laughter too openly. Emotions were a sign of undiscipline. In contrast, 18th century aristocrats wept publicly at operas, sometimes for status. They had the money to feel extravagantly. So yes, history too handed down its own emotion playbooks. Now imagine this. You grow up in a family where sadness is considered weakness. And so as a child, you learn to convert it into anger or indifference. Maybe even humor. It's a useful trick. It gets you through. But by the time you reach adulthood, you can't cry without apologizing first. Or worse, you don't even want to. Because that version of you doesn't feel like you anymore. And still the world nods. Friends call you strong. Co-workers say you're level-headed. You become someone others lean on, never mind that your own legs are sometimes shaking. It's emotional mimicry turned into personality, but it didn't start with you. It was taught, then rehearsed, then repeated until it stuck. A quirky historical tidbit: in ancient Rome, professional mourners called praefecti were hired to cry at funerals, loud, dramatic, heartbreaking wails. Their job was to show emotion so the grieving didn't have to. The family could remain stoic, dignified. In other words, the pain got outsourced. And you might still do this in quieter ways, letting a song feel sad for you, letting a movie cry on your behalf. Because faking isn't always lying. Sometimes it's delegation. Sometimes it's self-preservation. Here's a thought to hold gently. You may not have picked your default feelings. You may have inherited them or adapted to survive. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means they're worth examining. You pause tonight not to criticize yourself, but to wonder how many of your most frequent emotions are genuinely yours, and how many are echoes, well-worn grooves carved into you by the emotional weather of your upbringing, your culture, your past. You recall a moment you felt joy, but it came with guilt. Or you were angry but laughed instead. Those flips are clues. They're emotional dialects you speak without knowing the grammar. Even now, lying still, there's a voice in you, a quiet one that hesitates before feeling too much. It checks the room. It asks, is this allowed? That voice isn't fear. It's habit, one inherited, maybe even secondhand. But it still whispers loud enough to change what you let yourself feel. Tonight isn't about fixing that voice. It's about hearing it. You trace it back. You wonder whose voice it really was. Maybe your grandfather who never spoke of war. Maybe a mother who cleaned the kitchen to deal with grief. Maybe a teacher who called emotion drama. Maybe a society that told boys to man up and girls to calm down. Borrowed feelings, inherited faces. And now you begin to see the smallest rebellion might be this: letting yourself feel your version of the moment, raw, awkward, unrehearsed. Not just what your family taught, not what your culture prefers, not what earns you praise, but what actually rises unfiltered in the space between breath and thought. Not because it's beautiful, but because it's real. Somewhere in your memory, there's a moment when you had a feeling and someone told you it was wrong. You don't remember their exact words. Maybe it was a sigh, a quick correction, or just the way they looked at you like you were being too much, too sensitive, too loud, too dramatic. And that tiny moment folded itself neatly into your emotional rulebook. Tonight, you revisit that rulebook. You didn't write it, but you follow it. Most people do. It's full of quiet instructions like, don't cry in front of strangers, don't get angry unless someone else starts it, smile when you're uncomfortable, don't feel too happy, it might jinx something. And then there's the classic, just get over it. These aren't laws. No one passed them officially, but they govern you all the same. Not with punishments, but with the subtle chill of social pressure. You feel it in your chest when you're on the edge of saying how you really feel and something stops you. That little tightening, that pause. It's emotional etiquette, and it's almost never written down. Mainstream psychology calls this emotional suppression, when you consciously or unconsciously avoid expressing what you feel. But here's the catch: suppression doesn't delete emotion, it stores it. Like shoving clutter into a closet when guests are over. The mess is still there, just quieter, harder to find, maybe harder to name. Historians still argue whether the rise of emotional suppression in Western culture was a result of industrialization or religion. In medieval Europe, public emotion was often a sign of piety. People wept in church, beat their chests in processions. But by the Victorian era, Stoicism was fashionable, especially for men. Emotional restraint meant disciplined refinement. Tears were for women, and even then only in moderation. You feel the ripple of that, even now. Emotional control is still praised in job interviews, leadership manuals, and parenting books. We talk about managing emotions the way we talk about managing money. Keep it under control. Don't spend too much. Always save face. But what if you didn't manage them? What if you just notice them? There's a difference between control and awareness. Control is about outcome, what you do. Awareness is about presence, what is. And awareness is harder because it doesn't promise comfort, it just promises honesty. Let's go back for a second. You're a kid again. Something scares you. Maybe it's thunder. Maybe it's your parents shouting. You start to cry. And someone says, you're fine. Just 2 words. But now you're confused because inside you don't feel fine. So you learn my feelings might be wrong, or at least inconvenient. That lesson grows up with you. It becomes silence during breakups, numbness during grief, fake laughter in meetings. You become fluent in hiding, not because you're a liar, but because it's safer, or at least it was. Even now your body remembers the effort, the breath you hold when something upsets you, the way you smile without meaning to, the fact that your jaw hurts after a long day. That's not coincidence. That's performance. And yet the irony, people like you better that way. Polished, pleasant, predictable. You wonder what would happen if you showed someone the real emotion underneath. Maybe nothing. Maybe they'd be kind. Or maybe they'd flinch like your feelings are too raw to handle. That's the gamble, isn't it? And so you pick the safer bet, the smaller version, the I'm fine. A quirky historical detail: in 17th century Japan, samurai were trained not only in combat but in emotional masking. Dying with a smile was considered honorable proof that you weren't ruled by fear or pain. Some even wrote poems seconds before death as if to say, I control even this. Imagine the discipline required to feel terror and still reach for poetry. And now look at you, maybe not a samurai, but certainly a master of subtle emotional restraint. You don't even realize you're doing it most days. That little edit, that delay, that reroute from truth to tact. But here's a softer truth: emotions aren't threats, they're messengers. Anger says something was crossed. Sadness says something was lost. Joy says something is whole. Fear says something might matter. And yet we're trained to ignore the messenger, shoot it, shame it, or cover its mouth with a smile. Tonight you try something different. You listen. No fixing, no explaining, no performing. Just noticing. You scan your chest, your throat, your stomach. What lives there tonight? What flickers in the quiet? Maybe nothing dramatic. Maybe just a vague tension. a sigh that hasn't happened yet. That's still worth honoring. The emotional weather inside you doesn't need to justify itself. It doesn't need to make sense. It just is. And that's enough. Let the rule book gather dust tonight. You wake up some mornings and feel off. Not sad exactly. Not angry. Not tired in the usual way. Just off. Like your feelings showed up wearing the wrong clothes or speaking a language your brain can't quite translate. It's not dramatic, it's just weird. And the weirdness lingers. Tonight we call that what it is, emotional dissonance. You feel one thing but think another. You say I'm fine while your gut tightens. You smile but your hands won't stop fidgeting. You tell yourself this isn't a big deal, even though your heart's been racing since breakfast. It's like your body and your mind are reading different scripts, and both believe they're the main character. Mainstream psychology often refers to this as cognitive emotional dissonance, when your emotional responses and your rational thoughts don't match. It's more common than people think, especially now. You live in a world that moves too fast for emotions to catch up, so sometimes they get left behind, and then they show up late, confused, or completely out of sync. Let's take an example. You get promoted at work. Everyone congratulates you. You know logically this is good news, but you feel numb or anxious or weirdly sad, and you can't explain why. It makes no sense, but it doesn't have to. Historians still argue whether emotional logic, how feelings make sense, has ever really aligned with societal logic. In Enlightenment-era Europe, for instance, philosophers prized reason above all. Emotions were seen as animalistic, primitive. But in the Romantic period that followed, the pendulum swung the other way. Emotions became sacred, even superior to reason. Poets cried in the rain on purpose. Logic was out. Feelings were in. And now you're expected to be both. Rational at work, emotional in therapy. Stoic during a crisis, but vulnerable on social media. No wonder your brain and your heart don't always sync up. Here's something quirky. In ancient Greek medicine, emotions were thought to be physical fluids called humors. Anger came from yellow bile, sadness from black bile, joy from blood, and calm from phlegm. Feelings weren't just thoughts, they were substances. An imbalance in one meant imbalance in all. The body was the emotion. Tonight, maybe that still holds true. You're not just thinking your feelings, you're living them in your posture, your skin, your breath. You might not have a fever, but your jaw's been clenched since lunch. Your shoulders are up near your ears again. Your stomach hasn't relaxed in a week. The body keeps count even when the brain pretends not to notice. So what do you do with a feeling that doesn't match the moment? First, you stop asking it to make sense. That's hard. We're all trained to solve emotions like puzzles. If I feel bad, there must be a reason. And if there's no reason, the feeling must be invalid. But sometimes emotions are just echoes, delayed reactions, backlogged grief, or even misdirected signals like phantom pain where there's no wound. You may be fine now, but maybe you weren't fine 6 months ago, or 6 years, and the feeling finally caught up. Or maybe you've outgrown your own life in a subtle way. What once brought joy now feels dull. What used to excite you now leaves you tired. That doesn't mean something's broken. It just means you're shifting, slowly, quietly, like trees do, inch by inch, leaf by leaf. But this world wants speed. It wants clarity. It wants you to pick a mood, explain it in emojis, and move on. Not tonight. Tonight you sit with dissonance. You let yourself feel weird. You don't rush to fix it. You let it talk. Maybe not in words, but in warmth or chill, in tears that arrive uninvited, in silence that finally feels honest. You don't need to decode everything. Just notice. Here's a metaphor for you. Imagine your emotions as houseplants. Some are loud sunflowers, bright and demanding. Others are strange and slow growing, like those vines that only bloom at night. If you only ever water the loud ones, the rest wither quietly. And you wake up one day wondering why your inner world feels gray, even when nothing is wrong. Tonight, maybe one of those forgotten plants is trying to bloom. Let it. You don't have to post about it, or journal, or even fully understand. Just give it some air. Let your breath stay longer. Let your chest soften. Let the gap between I should feel X and I actually feel Y stretch without snapping. You are not broken because your feelings don't follow a script. You are just human, and that frankly is complicated. You remember the phrase, don't you? Don't take it personally. It shows up everywhere: breakups, job rejections, passive-aggressive emails signed best even that time. Someone cut you off in traffic and then waved like you were the problem. Don't take it personally is the world's most polite way of saying, this is about me, not you, but also maybe kind of about you. Tonight you unpack what it really means to take things personally. You're wired for it. It's not vanity, it's biology. Your brain is a pattern-making machine, and the most important pattern it tracks is you in relation to everything else. That's how you survived. In the earliest human groups, being liked wasn't about self-esteem. It was about not being left behind. If someone disliked you, that might mean no food, or no fire, or no warning when the saber-toothed tiger showed up. So now, centuries later, someone gives you a weird look in a meeting, and your brain goes, we're going to die. You're not going to die, of course, but the response is real and automatic. That's called egocentric attribution bias, a very mainstream psychology term for when you interpret other people's actions as being more about you than they actually are. And it's not just you. Everyone does it. It's deeply human. But sometimes that wiring backfires. You tell yourself someone's silence means they're mad at you, that a delayed text means rejection, that a friend's bad mood is your fault. And even if part of you knows better, that other part, the soft and suspicious part, whispers, what did I do wrong? Historians still argue whether this sensitivity is a modern affliction or an ancient constant. Some scholars say social media has made it worse. You're always seeing people's curated lives and comparing them to your unfiltered reality. Others believe it's simply the same ancient insecurity now wearing Wi-Fi. Back in 18th century France, letters were the emotional battleground. A well-timed silence or even a change in handwriting could send someone spiraling. People would read into every flourish and ink blot. Personal offense was an art form. So maybe over-personalizing isn't new. Maybe we've always been this way. We just swapped ink for typing speed. But let's get personal for a moment. You've probably lost sleep over things that weren't about you. You've rehearsed imaginary conversations where you defend yourself perfectly. You've explained yourself to people who weren't even listening. And the whole time, what you really wanted was simple to feel understood, to be safe from shame. But not everything can be understood. Sometimes people are distant because they're drowning. Sometimes they lash out because they're scared. Sometimes they're quiet because their own thoughts are too loud. And yes, sometimes people are just inconsiderate jerks, but not always. Here's a quirky detail from history. In ancient Mesopotamia, people believed personal misfortunes were caused by offending a god, often without knowing which one. So priests invented entire rituals just to apologize in case you'd done something wrong. It was basically emotional insurance. A celestial sorry if I made it weird. You still do this in your own way. You apologize when you're not sure what happened. You over-explain. You soften your voice. You shrink your needs to make room for others. All in the name of not taking up too much space, just in case someone else's bad day might be your fault. But what if you flipped that? What if just for tonight you assumed none of it was personal? The driver who cut you off rushing home to a sick kid. The friend who canceled last minute, overwhelmed, not avoiding you. The barista who forgot your order, human. This isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about loosening the grip of imagined responsibility. Because carrying every awkward pause and odd glance like it's a personal verdict, that's exhausting. You deserve rest. Let your breath drop into your belly. Let your shoulders release. Let the stories you've told yourself all day dissolve just for now. Not everything is a sign. Not everything is about you. And that is freedom. You've probably heard it before, people don't change. It's said like a warning or a rule. Something solid and sad and final. But tonight you're going to challenge that. Because while people may not change quickly, they do change. Slowly, reluctantly, in weird shapes and inconvenient timings. Sometimes so gradually that they don't even notice until they've already become someone else. And so have you. You're not the same person you were 5 years ago. Not even close. The way you fold your laundry or check your phone or say I'm fine with a very particular tone, those things have shifted. Your preferences have tilted. Your moods have grown roots in different soil. You crave different silences now. In psychology, there's something called the end of history illusion. It's the belief that while we've changed a lot in the past, we're pretty much done changing now. This moment right now feels like your final form, but it's not. 10 years from now, you'll laugh at how confident you were that this was the real you. Historians still argue whether personality itself is fixed or fluid. Some believe core traits stay stable over time, like extroversion, conscientiousness, or openness. Others argue that environment trauma and even sleep cycles can change who you are fundamentally. The truth is probably both. You have a core, sure, but you also have layers. And those layers shift, peel back, or thicken, depending on the storms you weather. There's a quirky fact about octopuses: they rewrite their own brains. Literally. Their neurons aren't just in their heads, they're spread throughout their arms. If one arm learns something, the others can pick it up without going through the brain. Their identity, in a way, is distributed. You're not an octopus unless you've been keeping secrets, but you're not all that different. You learn in pieces. One part of you matures while another stays stubborn. You might be brave at work but terrified in love, or confident in ideas but insecure in your body. You evolve unevenly, and that's okay. You might think I should be better by now, but better is vague. Better than what than the version of yourself who didn't know what you now know. Growth rarely announces itself. It shows up in tiny rebellions. You don't respond to that text right away. You ask for what you need even if your voice shakes. You say no without apologizing. You forgive yourself faster. You don't always get it right, but the fact that you notice, that's change. Here's something else. Identity isn't just a mirror, it's a story. And you're both the author and the unreliable narrator. You rewrite your own past depending on how you feel in the present. That time you were too shy. Now you see it as caution. That relationship you thought was perfect. Now you see the cracks. Your own memories get new captions every time you revisit them. Tonight, maybe you revisit gently. Think of a version of yourself from long ago, awkward, unsure, maybe even a little embarrassing. They tried their best. They didn't have your hindsight, but they carried you this far. That counts for something. You're still carrying yourself now, with new flaws, sure, but also new wisdom, new patience, new scars that taught you boundaries. You are not static. Even in sleep, your cells are regenerating. Your body is busy becoming something new. You're allowed to change your mind about people, about priorities, about dreams. You're even allowed to mourn the person you thought you'd become and welcome the strange, beautiful one you're actually turning into. Not everyone will understand your evolution. Some will want the old you back, the easy you, the smaller you, but they don't get to choose, and you don't owe them an explanation beyond this simple truth. I'm still figuring it out. Let that be enough for tonight. Let your breath rise without effort. Let your thoughts melt into something kinder. Let your body exhale all the expectations you didn't even realize you were still carrying. You're not finished yet, and that is wonderful. Let's talk about control, or rather your favorite illusion. You like to think you're in control, that if you plan enough, prepare enough, worry just the right amount, you'll dodge disappointment. You'll prevent disaster. You'll earn your peace. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not steering this ship. You're patching sails in a storm you didn't schedule. There's a name for this very human behavior: the illusion of control. It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon where people overestimate their influence over outcomes, especially in situations involving chance. Casinos are built on it. So are a lot of relationships. So is your deep, desperate habit of refreshing your email like it's a spell. Historians still argue whether this illusion is adaptive or dangerous. Some suggest it helps us function in a chaotic world. It gives us agency, purpose, hope. Others argue it feeds anxiety and unrealistic expectations. That trying to control everything leaves you brittle, exhausted, always bracing for the next thing to go wrong. But you weren't always like this. As a kid, you didn't need to know what came next. You climbed trees without knowing their names. You trusted the road without checking traffic apps. You believed in invisible things like kindness and maybe fairies. The world was mysterious but not terrifying. Somewhere along the way, mystery started to mean risk. And risk you learned to dodge. You started organizing, optimizing, preemptively apologizing. You became a fixer, a planner, a worrier with a calendar. And it worked until it didn't. Because life rudely refuses to obey checklists. People get sick, jobs fall through, plans unravel, the package gets delayed, the words you meant to say arrive too late or land wrong. And then you're left staring at a reality that didn't match your spreadsheet. So you double down. You tighten the grip. You micromanage your feelings. You start a sentence with, "if only I had." and you chase the phantom of perfection until you're too tired to sleep. But here's the quirky twist. Some of history's most controlled moments were actually accidents. Penicillin total lab mistake. Coca-Cola invented as a medicine. The microwave sparked by a melted candy bar in a scientist's pocket. Control didn't create those things. Curiosity and openness did. You can still be intentional without being rigid. You can have a direction without demanding the exact scenery. Let's do a small inventory, just you and me. Think of 3 things today that didn't go as planned. Maybe one was annoying. Maybe one made you late. Maybe one broke your heart just a little. Then think of something beautiful that didn't go as planned, like a stranger's smile or a joke that surprised you or the way the light hit your floor just right. Uncertainty doesn't just bring loss, it also brings wonder. And while you're not in control of everything, you are in charge of how you respond, of when you rest, of what you water, of which stories you stop telling yourself. You are not the captain of every current, but you do choose the sail. Tonight, you don't have to solve anything. You don't have to predict tomorrow's mood or pre-write your reactions to a problem that hasn't even arrived. You're allowed to say, I don't know yet. You're allowed to pause. Breathe like the wind isn't your enemy. Let your jaw unclench. Let your spine lengthen. Let go of the mental spreadsheets. Let the world be unfinished without you holding every corner of it together. Some things will always be beyond your control, but that doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you're human. You know what's scarier than failure? Success. Real, undeniable, deeply uncomfortable success. Because once you get the thing you said you wanted, once the job lands or the love arrives, or the dream cracks open into reality, you're faced with a question that shakes your spine. Now what? See, failure is familiar. It has structure. It lets you hide in potential. You can always say, well, if I really tried, or next time. It's safe in a way. But success that demands something new, something vulnerable. Success says, prove you belong here. There's a name for the tremble that creeps in when you succeed: imposter syndrome. It's not rare. In fact, around 70% of people across all professions, genders, and ages experience it at some point. That sense that you're just faking it, that everyone else knows what they're doing, that your wins are accidents, that you're one mistake away from being exposed. You know that feeling. You've smiled through compliments that felt too generous. You've dismissed your achievements as just lucky or not a big deal. You've worried that one day someone will come knocking and say, sorry, this was meant for someone else. Historians still argue whether imposter syndrome stems more from internal personality traits or external systems like biased workplaces, unrealistic expectations, or societal roles that push you to prove your worth over and over again. Whatever its roots, its impact is clear. It makes you smaller than you are. There's a quirky little footnote from history here. When Albert Einstein was at the height of his fame, he privately wrote, "The exaggerated esteem in which my life work is held makes me very ill at ease. I feel compelled to think of myself as an involuntary swindler." Even Einstein thought he was faking it. So if you've ever felt like your success doesn't count because it came too easily or too late or didn't look how you thought it would, that's not failure. That's fear talking in a new costume. Fear doesn't go away just because you win. It evolves. It finds subtler disguises. But you don't have to listen. You are not an accident. You are not a fluke. You are not someone else's placeholder. You're you, full stop. And part of you already knows this deep down, because if you truly didn't believe you had something to offer, you wouldn't care so much. You wouldn't try. You wouldn't show up. But you do. You try harder than you admit. You want to be proud of yourself. And that desire means you're not just bluffing your way through. It means you care. And here's the truth. Success doesn't always tell you it's not a finish line. It's a beginning. Getting what you want doesn't end the story. It opens a new one. One where you show up again and again, even when you're scared. One where you let the praise in, even if your hands shake. One where you learn how to enjoy the view without wondering if you took the wrong trail. You can succeed and still feel uncertain. That's part of the process. Growth doesn't eliminate doubt. It just makes you brave enough to keep moving anyway. Tonight, let go of the need to deserve everything good in your life. Worthiness isn't a checklist. It's a birthright. You're here. You made it this far. That counts. Let your shoulders relax. Let your breathing slow. Let the idea settle that you don't have to perform to belong. You already belong. You're not pretending. You're becoming. There's something you keep doing quietly, automatically, like a reflex, and tonight we're going to look it in the eye. You compare, not always loudly, not always bitterly. Sometimes it's just a glance, a thought, a tiny pang. They're already married, he's younger than me and already successful. She always looks so calm. And then comes the silent question you barely notice forming. What's wrong with me? Comparison is one of the oldest tricks your brain plays on you. It's part of your wiring. Early humans had to evaluate their place in the group to survive. If you were too slow, too weak, too strange, you might get left behind. So your mind learned to scan for difference. It learned to measure. But the world you live in now, it's a carnival of curated illusions, and your brain's still playing by Stone Age rules. Historians still argue whether social comparison is more destructive now than in the past or just more visible. What's clear is this: in a digital age, comparison isn't just a survival tool. It's a lifestyle. Entire platforms profit from it. And every scroll, every post, every filtered selfie becomes a tiny judgment against yourself. But here's the twist: comparison doesn't measure truth. It measures visibility. You only see what people choose to show. You see highlight reels, not behind the scenes. You see the finished painting, not the torn sketches. And somehow you compare your messiest mornings to their most photogenic seconds and wonder why you feel behind. Let's go back to something oddly reassuring. There's no universal timeline. Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa at 51. Julia Child published her first cookbook at 49. Morgan Freeman got his breakout role in his 50s. Meanwhile, Mozart was composing symphonies at 8 and died at 35. Time is not a race, it's a spiral. You're not late, you're just arriving in your own rhythm. And the person you're comparing yourself to, they're probably comparing themselves to someone else. It's a human loop, but you don't have to stay trapped in it. Try this gently when that jealous itch creeps in. Pause. Instead of asking, why don't I have that, ask, what is it about that touches something in me? Sometimes what you admire in others is a mirror, something you already have just dormant. Sometimes it's a compass pointing you toward a value or a dream you haven't named yet. And sometimes it's just noise, an echo of someone else's story that was never meant to be yours. You can be inspired without feeling small. You can celebrate someone else's win without discounting your own. And when you feel behind, when everyone else seems to be sprinting ahead, remind yourself that rest is not laziness. Pausing is not failing. And healing, that's its own kind of progress. Tonight, unclench from the scoreboard. You don't need to outrun anyone to be enough. You don't need to win first place in someone else's game. You only need to listen for your own rhythm, your own season. Maybe this is your wintering time. Maybe you're underground, growing unseen. Maybe your moment hasn't bloomed yet, but it's coming. Let yourself breathe. Let yourself belong in your own life, not someone else's highlight reel. The only timeline that matters is the one that fits your soul. Let's talk about your memory. Not the little day-to-day lapses, like where you left your keys or what you meant to buy at the store, but the deeper, stickier kind. The stories you carry, the ones that rise in the dark, uninvited, and whisper their version of events. Here's the strange thing about memory: it lies. Not maliciously, not because it wants to trick you, but because it's not a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you recall a moment, your brain reassembles it. It fills in gaps. It adds color. It smooths over what it doesn't understand. Memory is an artist, not a journalist. Historians still argue whether memory can ever be truly objective, whether eyewitness testimony, for instance, is reliable or mostly theater. In courtrooms and classrooms, memory is treated as fact, but in reality, it's more like clay shaped by time, mood, suggestion, and context. This means the stories you tell yourself about your past, they're more fluid than you think. Maybe you've spent years believing you ruined something, a relationship, an opportunity, a moment. But that version of the story was edited by fear. Maybe it wasn't a failure, but a necessary redirection. Maybe it was never your fault. Or maybe you did mess up, but you're not frozen in that version of yourself. Because you change, constantly, and so does the meaning of your memories. Take Thomas Edison. Most people remember him as the light bulb guy. But what's less known is how many times he failed. There's debate about the number. Some say 1,000, some say 10,000. But the point is, he didn't view those failed attempts as disasters. He said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Imagine reframing your past like that. What if your worst day wasn't a catastrophe, but a blueprint for the life you're still building? What if the version of you that made that mistake was doing the best they could with what they knew? What if you forgave yourself not because it changes the past, but because it changes how you carry it? There's a quirky detail from psychology here too, the reminiscence bump. It's the tendency for people, especially over 40, to recall more vivid memories from ages 10 to 30. It's why your brain clings to those years, shaping your identity around them. But here's the comforting part. Even those vivid memories aren't fixed. You can revisit them, reinterpret them, soften them. Tonight, try this exercise. Pick one old story you've been telling yourself. Maybe it ends with guilt or shame or self-blame. Now imagine watching it like a movie, but this time with compassion. Imagine yourself at that moment, scared, unprepared, trying. Then whisper to that version of you, "You did your best. It's okay now." You're not obligated to keep rehearsing pain to prove it mattered. You're allowed to heal. You're allowed to outgrow the story that says you're broken. Let your memory be a garden, not a cage. Let it bloom in new colors. Let it forget a few thorns. Let it remember the light that was there, even if you didn't notice it at the time. You're not who you were. You're not even who you were yesterday. And the story isn't over. There's a part of you buried somewhere between the back of your mind and the pit of your stomach that's always waiting to be ready, ready to take the risk, ready to say what you mean, ready to start that thing you've been quietly dreaming about for years. But here's the uncomfortable truth. That moment of perfect readiness, it never comes. You wait, and the world doesn't pause with you. It keeps spinning. The deadlines pass, the seasons change, your coffee cools, and your courage, if you don't use it, curdles into regret. Historians still argue whether history favors the prepared or the impulsive. Alexander the Great charged into Persia with barely a plan and rewrote the map of the known world. Meanwhile, Chinese General Zhuge Liang was revered for caution. He once waited for an ideal wind to launch a fire attack. Both strategies worked, but not because they were ready, because they moved. And maybe that's what you need to hear tonight. You don't need to be ready. You need to be willing. Willing to try while still uncertain. Willing to begin without all the answers. Willing to risk looking a little silly, a little shaky, a little too human. There's an odd psychological quirk called the intention-behavior gap. You plan, you hope, you intend, but you don't always act. Your brain loves the idea of growth. It's just not always keen on the discomfort that comes with it. So it stalls. It bargains. It whispers, "Let's wait a little longer. Let's wait until it's safer." But change isn't safe. Not entirely. It never has been. Rosa Parks didn't wait until she had the perfect speech prepared. Harriet Tubman didn't wait until she had backup. And Marie Curie, she didn't wait until she had a lab that wasn't literally poisoning her. They moved imperfectly, bravely, tiredly, but they moved. You don't need to change your life overnight. You just need to nudge it. Say the thing you've been holding back. Take the class. Send the email. Write the first awkward paragraph. Walk into the room even if your hands are shaking. You will never feel 100% ready. And that's okay. Readiness is a myth sold by fear to keep you still. But willingness is a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. Try this. Instead of asking, "Am I ready?" ask, "Is it worth it even if I mess up?" Most of the time it is. And here's a quirky historical tidbit to keep in your back pocket. When the Eiffel Tower was first built, Parisians hated it, called it an eyesore, a gigantic black smokestack. There were protests, petitions, outrage, but Eiffel built it anyway. And now it's one of the most beloved landmarks on the planet. Sometimes what looks foolish at first becomes the thing that defines you later. So maybe tonight, as you drift between thoughts and dreams, you can let go of perfection. Let go of needing to be ready. Let go of waiting for the green light that never comes. Let go of the fantasy where you arrive at your life only once everything is safe and certain and guaranteed. You don't need permission to begin. You don't need a guarantee to move. You just need one quiet, shaky, beautiful yes. Let's wander for a moment into the quiet corridors of loneliness. It's not a fun place to go, granted, but it's real. And it's probably more crowded than you think. Because the strange thing about loneliness is that it rarely looks like what you expect. It doesn't always mean being alone. Sometimes you feel loneliest in a crowd. Sometimes you're surrounded by friends, even smiling, and still feel miles away from everyone. You know that feeling. Like you're underwater and everyone else is breathing air. Like you're a song stuck in the wrong playlist. And here's the kicker: evolution designed you to feel this way. Humans are social creatures. Your brain treats isolation as a threat, same as physical pain. It lights up the same regions when you feel socially rejected as it does when you stub your toe. That hollow ache in your chest, it's not in your head, it's real, and it's wired into your biology. Historians still argue whether early human societies punished members by exile because it hurt more than death. Some think banishment was worse than a beating, because at least a beating ends. But loneliness lingers. It loops. It whispers lies. You don't matter. No one sees you. You're the only one who feels this way. But none of that is true. Even in history's loneliest moments, connection found a way. Anne Frank, sealed away in an attic, still wrote letters to a diary like it was a friend. Galileo, isolated under house arrest, kept writing to colleagues across Europe, still fighting to be heard. And in a 17th century Japanese monastery poet, Basho, walked miles alone just to feel part of the world again, and left us haiku that still hum with quiet companionship. There's a soft rebellion in admitting you're lonely. It pushes back against shame. Because loneliness doesn't mean something's wrong with you. It means you're alive. It means you care. There's also a quirky modern detail. In 2018, the UK appointed a minister for loneliness. Not as a gimmick, but because they recognized it as a public health crisis. And since then, other countries have begun exploring the same. Because they're starting to admit what many people whisper at 3 a.m., this world feels isolating sometimes, even when we're more connected than ever. So here's a thought. What if instead of shrinking from loneliness, you got curious about it? What if you treated it like a signal, not a flaw? Maybe it's pointing you towards something, a change. You need a connection. You crave a truth you haven't said out loud yet. Tonight, don't try to banish the loneliness. Sit with it. Listen to it. Let it talk. Let it soften. Then imagine someone else, somewhere else, lying awake in a different room, feeling the same ache. Picture them hearing this story, breathing with you, holding the same invisible thread. Because you're not as alone as you feel. Your quiet is shared, your ache is echoed, your story is seen. And if nothing else, right now in this moment, you and I are here together. You know that moment when you catch your own reflection, not in a mirror, but unexpectedly in a dark window or the back of a spoon. And for a half second, you don't recognize yourself. There's something surreal about it. Like catching a glimpse of the person you've become instead of the one you think you still are. And it can hit harder than you expect. You change. Quietly, reluctantly, often without noticing. But change is constant. It's baked into your body, your habits, your memories. And yet there's a weird little myth floating around that people have a true self, some fixed, glowing identity waiting to be uncovered like a buried treasure. Let's be clear, that's lovely and also complete nonsense. Historians still argue whether identities in the past were more fluid or more rigid. In medieval Europe, for instance, your role peasant, merchant, priest defined you from cradle to grave. No questions asked. But even then, people slipped the mold, disguised themselves, escaped their roles, pretended to be someone new if only for a while. In the 1400s, a French woman named Jeanne des Anges claimed to be possessed by demons. Her behavior, erratic, bold, unconventional, terrified the church. But scholars still debate, was it madness, performance, protest, or simply a desperate act of self-definition? Even back then, people longed to control the story of who they were. And you rewrite that story all the time. Your brain is a brilliant but slightly unreliable historian. It remembers events not as they were, but as you feel they were. Every time you recall a memory, you change it. Just a little. Polish the good bits, dull the sharp edges. Your past is a diary you rewrite without realizing. You're not lying to yourself, you're evolving. There's a term for this narrative identity. It's the story you tell about who you are, and it shifts depending on your mood, your needs, even your audience. You might tell one version of yourself to your parents, another to your best friend, a third to strangers online, all true and none complete. The person you were 10 years ago, a stranger in your skin. The person you'll be 10 years from now, equally unfamiliar. But here's the grace in all that: you don't have to stay one thing. You can outgrow your own expectations. You can abandon stories that no longer serve you. You can be messy, inconsistent, contradictory, and still worthy. Because identity isn't a single painting, it's a gallery. Some portraits are half finished, some are in charcoal, some are painted over others. But all of them are you. Tonight, as you lie there in the dark, maybe you can loosen your grip on who you think you have to be. Let the edges blur. Let the story breathe. You're not stuck. Not in your job or your name or your mistakes, not in your habits or your fears or even your reputation. You're allowed to pivot, to update, to surprise yourself. And when you next catch your reflection, maybe in the glass of a bus window or the gloss of your phone screen, don't flinch. Just say hi. That's not a stranger. That's someone in progress. Let's sit for a while with the idea of belief not in gods or ghosts necessarily, but belief in its raw form, that deeply human instinct to assign meaning. Because you do it constantly, you find patterns where none exist. You knock on wood. You wish on eyelash hairs. You assign meaning to songs that happen to play when you're sad, or license plates that end in your birthday, or dreams that feel just a little too pointed. And you're not alone. Across time and place, humans have clung to beliefs like driftwood, floating meanings crafted from scraps of experience. Why? Because it's terrifying to think everything might be random. So we make stories, we link cause and effect, we decide what matters. Historians still argue whether early cave paintings were religious rituals or just really committed doodles. Some suggest those animals drawn again and again were meant to influence the hunt. Others say it was a kind of prehistoric journaling, or maybe both, meaning layered on meaning until even a handprint on a cave wall becomes sacred. And sometimes belief becomes powerful enough to change the world. Take the dancing plague of 1518, a real historical event. One summer in Strasbourg, dozens of people began dancing in the streets, wild, uncontrollable days at a time. Some collapsed. Some died. No music, no explanation. But belief fed it. People said it was divine punishment or spiritual possession, and so the dancing spread. A community trapped in a feedback loop of fear, faith, and movement. Modern theories point to stress mass hysteria, ergot poisoning, yes, the same fungus that leads to LSD, but still no single cause, just a mystery shaped by belief. Because belief, even misplaced, is a force. It can be comforting. It can be dangerous. It can help a single mother survive a war zone or convince an entire cult to vanish into the jungle. It can make a person jump higher, heal faster, or try harder, pure placebo, but real results. And belief doesn't always need evidence. Sometimes you believe because you have to. Because doubt is heavier than hope. Because something in you whispers there has to be more. And that's okay. Tonight, don't interrogate every thought. Let some beliefs pass through unchallenged. Believe for a moment that you are safe, that the worst is behind you, that something gentle waits on the other side of this rest. Believe just for now that you are doing better than you think. That rest is productive. That quiet counts. You don't have to justify your worth. You don't have to earn peace. You're allowed to close your eyes and trust that things can get better. That this story doesn't end in despair. That tomorrow holds something new. Even if it's just a really good cup of coffee, or a song you forgot you loved, or a reason to laugh halfway through brushing your teeth. Belief doesn't always need thunder and lightning. Sometimes it's soft, just the quiet choice to hope again. And here we are, near the end of the trail. You've walked through memory and mirrors, through loneliness and longing, through the soft shape of belief. And now we arrive at the edge of something even stranger, the unknown. You've lived your entire life trying to make sense of the world. You name things, label them, box them up with neat explanations. But the truth is, much of what surrounds you, what makes you, is mystery. You can't see gravity. You can't measure love with a ruler. You can't predict your next thought before it happens. You are at your very core a swirl of unknowns wearing the costume of a person. And that's not a flaw, it's a feature. Historians still argue whether ancient civilizations feared the unknown more than we do now, or simply made better stories to explain it. The Greeks told of chaos birthing the gods. The Egyptians imagined the world rising out of a dark, formless ocean. Even early scientists scribbling by candlelight often slipped myth into their measurements, because not knowing has always been unbearable and irresistible. In the 1800s, a physician named Ignaz Semmelweis suggested that doctors should wash their hands before surgery. The idea seemed absurd. His colleagues mocked him. Why? Because the concept of invisible germs, things you couldn't see or touch, felt too strange to believe. Semmelweis died in disgrace. Years later, germ theory proved him right. The unknown is where progress lives. It's also where fear hides. And yet, look at you, still breathing, still learning, still pushing forward. Every choice you make is a little leap into the unknown. Every friendship you start, every risk you take, even falling asleep, is a kind of surrender. You let go of control, You close your eyes. You trust you'll wake again. Tonight, as you settle into the last stretch of this story, maybe let that be enough. You don't have to solve yourself. You don't need every answer. You are not a riddle waiting to be decoded. You are a living question mark, and that is beautiful. So loosen your grip. Let go of the need to be certain. Let the soft hum of the unknown cradle you, not scare you. No one has it all figured out, not the scientists, not the poets, not even the people who look confident at parties. Everyone's guessing. Everyone's floating a little. And yet somehow we keep going. We build, we love. We tell stories in the dark. We light candles against the chaos and say, let's try anyway. So here's your candle, a flicker in the vast velvet unknown. Take it with you and rest. You made it. No rush now. No need to keep walking. Let the path fade behind you like breath on glass. Let each step you've taken dissolve into the hush of sleep. It's quiet here, softer, slower. The edges of your thoughts begin to blur like mist curling over water. Even your name, your worries, your plans for tomorrow, let them melt into the stillness. You're not being lazy. You're not wasting time. This rest is necessary, deserved, sacred. Feel your weight sink into the mattress. Feel your breath lengthen, deepen. No one needs anything from you right now. You've given enough. And in this quiet space, remember you are not broken. You are not behind. You are not too much or not enough. You are simply human, a beautiful, complicated, ever-changing swirl of stardust and story. Somewhere out there, the world turns gently onward. Streetlights flicker, leaves rustle. Someone else is listening too, just like you, breathing slow, drifting deeper. And maybe you both find the same small peace in this moment. The peace of being allowed to pause, to not have the answers, to just be. So sleep now, storyteller, dreamer, believer in better. Sleep deeply, sleep kindly. And when you wake, the world will still be there, ready for your next question.